Desha Shunya Hari Paschatya Deshatari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Together. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Tonight we have Dayananda Prabhu as our speaker. He's a long-term member, one of the first members of the ISKCON Society, who was a direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He had many personal exchanges and friendship with him, and now he will share some of his wisdom with us. What's the topic?
Happiness.
Happiness.
So what?
Generally, the speech and the questions, they go to around 8:15, and then we make another 10 minutes of kirtan, and then we have dinner.
Okay. 8:15. Happiness. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuro Nityandena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Dina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamakyam Dadati Sapadam. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes three levels of happiness. Perhaps you're familiar with the three concepts of Tama, Raja, and Sattva. Tama is the lowest. Tama means darkness. Then Raja, we generally Prabhupada translated as passion. Raja means passion. In this culture, we have a very good impression of that word passion. So sometimes, although Prabhupada translates passion, I prefer not to, or I prefer to look for something that's a little less popular, I guess, because Raja is still not on the highest platform. So we'll come back to that. Passion. Then Sattva means goodness. So ignorance, passion, and goodness. But I've written a book, and I wanted to communicate without fully, without using these words, ignorance, passion, and goodness, because I feel in modern culture it's a little vague. So in my book I use highly selfish for ignorance, less selfish for lack of a better term, and unselfish or characterized by service. So, and then highly selfish, because one of the definitions that Krishna gives in the Gita is intoxicated or inebriated. I give the example of somebody who's a drug user. So a serious drug user is often it's a selfish position. It's often somebody who's a problem for the family. Sometimes we hear that that person steals, maybe even from his mother or father, or and society also causes problems in society. So it's a very almost involuntary selfishness. Involuntary in the sense that such a person has this heavy addiction and creates this sort of selfishness the person is bound up by that condition. But we are all bound up by our conditions. There's something called karma bandha. Bandha means bound by our karma. Now, karma, there's a popular understanding of karma. Like if I give a homeless person $1 in the morning, I'll get something good in the evening. But meaning that it's sort of cause and effect. That's true in a very limited sense. The word karma is from the root krit, which means to do. So the word karma means activity or doing something, acting. And karma, we can act in the word karma means to act according to our profession or our nature. In the world, we're influenced by nature, although in modern society, especially the humanistic understanding or the modern American understanding is that we're free to choose our destiny, we're free to act according to the way we think. But other societies, like the Bhagavad Gita, many other societies, a lot of people around the world, not America, believe that there is a destiny, that we are controlled by our destiny. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that we are controlled by the nature, by this nature that we can see and by a nature that lies beyond what we see. So karma, we act according to our inclination, according to our ability, according to our nature, our DNA, and according to how we've been raised or how we're influenced in the world. But the karma that we're familiar with, this cause and effect, it comes about because how much are we attached to the fruits of that karma? Meaning that we act and then there's some result. But in a sense, we have control over our actions. We do something, it's very immediate, it's part of us, we're always acting, feeding ourselves, walking here and there. So this is quite within our realm. But the results of our action, if we're going to work, we're getting money. So why is it that you are working and you're not getting the same kind of money that Elon Musk is getting or whoever? So that's because we actually don't control the results that we're achieving. And if we become attached to those results, this is according to the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, if we become attached to those results, that's karma bandha. That means we're bound up by our work. It's the results of the action. So in Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't just say, oh, I'm going to be detached from the money. I don't care. You're my employer. You're giving me my payment. No, you don't give me money. No, that's not detachment. Detachment is that we use the money for some higher purpose. Krishna describes, use the money for a higher purpose. But the ultimate purpose, Krishna says, is me, Krishna. Then he says, if you can't use that money for me, you don't have that bhakti, that devotion, then you use it for some other higher purpose that goes beyond yourself, that goes beyond your selfish interests. Could be for your nature, for broader nature. You're going to the Amazon to plant trees, you're going to, you're going to do something for humanity, for your country. It starts to get a little bit more and more selfish. As you do something for humanity, as you do something for your country, it's a little selfish because we're identified with our country as an extension of ourselves. Do something for our community, now getting more and more selfish. Family, our extended self. Ourselves, that's... So, it's really based on these three divisions, the ignorance, passion, and goodness, are really indexed by level of selfishness. And the way to become free or elevated is to become less selfish. And again, I'll use the word index. It's kind of, it is indexed on the fruits of our work, how we're working. I mean, we often talk in Krishna Consciousness about chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. But that chanting is, well, I won't get into the whole philosophy of how it relates to what I'm saying now, but the chanting is meant to connect us with Krishna, with that higher realm. So when we chant Hare Krishna, it connects us with Krishna. Krishna is dancing on our tongue. And Prabhupada explains that we don't, although the devotees in the temple, we chant certain amount every day. But Prabhupada said, no, try not to chant just out of a sense of duty, although we do that, have a sense of duty for how much we chant. He says, chant with love. So, of course, this is difficult if we're chanting, and we have to remember love. So I was thinking, well, what does he mean, love? How can I chant with love? But we also learn that love is service. Sometimes we think of love in a very selfish kind of way. Love means I feel good. I feel good about you. I love you. It means that you're beautiful and I love looking at you because it pleases me. Or however I think of you, I love you. But that's really a very selfish perspective. The mother loves the child because she has to take that child when it soils itself. I'm being polite here. And she has to clean up the child in the middle of the night. She's losing sleep. If you speak to a mother, it's kind of horrible because the first few months especially, baby keeps her up all night, screaming for either milk or affection or because it crapped its diapers or whatever. And the mother, that's love, service. She's not getting really any enjoyment from this child. She's not getting much at all, except what nature itself gives her, that bond that she feels from nature. So our higher nature, of course, is to connect with Krishna, and we have to remember how to kind of grow that connection. But that love, when Prabhupada said to chant with love, not just duty, I thought, well, yeah, I have to, maybe I don't know about that higher love, but I do know service. So let me try to chant in that mood of service. How can I serve Krishna? How can I connect through service? So my point is that from one, we're talking about happiness, the lowest level, I was making an analogy with a drug addict who's extremely selfish. Middle level, I skipped over, and the highest level is unselfish but characterized by service. So, and I was talking about work and the fruits of work. We call it the fruits of work because the Sanskrit says karma phala. Phala means fruit. So karma phala means the fruit of karma. So detachment it's not a mental exercise. Sometimes people speak of it. Hare Krishna.
Sorry.
No problem. Sometimes people speak of detachment as a mental exercise. And in our devotee community, sometimes we tell each other, oh, Prabhu, don't be so attached. You have something, maybe you're a little fond of it or something. Oh, you shouldn't be so attached to that. So, because we have this in our vocabulary, we're using it all the time, attachment and detachment. But the real karma phala, the real way to become detached is to use the results of our work, not just mentally be detached, but use those results for something selfless. And of course, our understanding of the highest use is service to Krishna. And then Krishna says in his 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that, all right, if you can't come to that high standard, the important thing, if you can't, the thing of highest importance is this bhakti connection with Krishna, pure love of Krishna. And then if you can't come to that, then all right, you find some level that you feel comfortable with. Sacrifice. It's a sacrifice. It's an offering of the results of your work. Because that's what binds us. That's the karma bandha. That's the thing that binds us in this world. Just like that drug addict is bound by his physical addiction and mental addiction, bound to be selfish and to ruin himself and ruin all those close to him and ruin society. So, happiness from selfish to service. Now, I also touched on the idea of this drug addict. So we want to enjoy. This is when they were writing up the little the little one paragraph write up on the talk, he was asking me, well, so happiness, all right, 3 levels of happiness. So then I said, selfishness to service. Then I said, enjoyment, non-exploitative enjoyment and exploitative enjoyment. So enjoyment, that also has to do with happiness. We are by nature enjoyers. There's a verse in the Vedanta Sutra, it's Anandamoyo Bhyasat. That actually refers to the Supreme, that the Supreme is Anandamoya. Moya means composed of, and Ananda means enjoyment. So the Supreme is composed of enjoyment. That's the enjoyment is his form. It's who the Supreme is. Sat Chit Ananda. Maybe you've heard this. Sat Chit Ananda used to be the name of a famous Swami, Swami Satchidananda. Sat means existence, could also mean eternality, eternal existence. Sat Chit. Chit means consciousness or knowledge, awareness, generally knowledge, and then Ananda, enjoyment. So this is the form, this is the nature, the composition of the Supreme, Satchidananda. And also we, our soul, Atma, our self, is made of this Satchidananda. So enjoyment is part of us. We express that enjoyment through these bodies, and it's in relation to our surroundings. We have these senses, and the senses are magnetically attracted to the objects. This is the external world. Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita. I love this word, dhyayato vishayan pungsa. So pungsa, a person, dhyayata, contemplates or meditates. Dhyaya, dhi, is the root. So dhyaya means contemplate, and vishayan means the objects. So the objects are, if we have five senses, they're tasting, hearing, seeing, touching, smelling. So then the objects are the thing I smell, the fragrance, or the senses seeing, so it's the form and the color, all these things that I see. So there's a magnetic attraction. Dhyayato vishayan, so contemplating these things. Pungsa. Sangha, I want to become associated with those things. By that, of course, or repelled. We see a beautiful person, for example, an attractive person, and we're attracted. Oh, I'd like to know that person. And similarly, we see somebody who's not desirable or something undesirable. We're repulsed. So jhaito vishayan pungsa. Sangasteshu pajayate. So then the attachment or the attraction rather becomes greater, and then sangatsam jayati kama. Kama means that desire, lust. So the idea is to avoid that desire, but again, it can't be done. It's not a mental exercise. So how to do that? How will we break that desire to associate with this outside world, and break that and find attachment, that same sangha within, in the soul. So enjoyment, this is one of the keys, that we are, as soul, we are made of enjoyment, and we are seeking it by this external sangha, this external association with the world. Excuse me. And the idea is to the internal sangha. Now we have something we call sadhu sangha. You probably know, you've heard that. Sadhu sangha means the attachment that we have to the the sadhus, or the saintly persons, other people who are practicing spiritual life. So that we're looking for attachment to those people. That brings us closer to this higher level of attachment. So, enjoyment. We're talking about enjoyment. Now, when we're enjoying on this low level, this level of selfishness, like the drug addict, with all due respect to the drug addict, we're all, unfortunately, bound up here in the world. However, to whatever degree we're bound up. So in a sense, we are also kind of like drug addicts, addicted to the enjoyments of the world. So that's a kind of addiction. Thank you very much. So the enjoyment that we express, or that we search for, we try to satisfy ourselves with. If it's highly selfish, then that's destructive. So we should then try to rise up from that to a more service-oriented selfishness. Of course, it's, when I say selfishness, it's in the middle level. This service starts on the middle level of enjoyment, happiness. So we get happy when we serve others for our self-interest. So, you know, there's a lot of corporations that maybe they give endowments to such as an art museum, and so people they love their philanthropy and their largesse, and sometimes we feel good if we give money to someone that's, I don't know, homeless person or a beggar or something like that. So that makes us feel good. So that's service, but for selfish kind of interest. So that's middle level. But the highest level is unselfish service, which is extremely difficult to achieve, but in Krishna consciousness, or among those who follow the Bhagavad Gita, this is what we're looking for. And this high level of unselfish service, it's characterized by happiness, by enjoyment, by satisfaction, because we are meant to enjoy. That's part of us. We are Satchidananda, that's the soul, Satchidananda. So when we achieve this, what we're doing is we're uncovering ourselves. This is a covering, karma bandha, we're bound. And this covering is coming off, and we reach a higher level of enjoyment. Of course, this is on the highest level. This is not the goal. It's not our goal to enjoy. And there's a sweet story. I don't know if I can tell it nicely. It's a while since I read this, but this maybe you can help me with this. That Krishna, there was this Brahmin was hosting Krishna, yeah? And then he was fanning Krishna. But then he would go into ecstasy as he was fanning. So he was giving this service to Krishna, fanning him. You know, in those days, of course, you didn't have any electricity. So he's fanning, and then he was going to ecstasy, and it was disturbing his service. And so he was very irritated with himself. Yes? Am I telling this correctly? So he's very irritated with himself that he was feeling ecstasy in service to Krishna, because he felt that high level of happiness was inhibiting his service. So this kind of of happiness, that we're so happy that we're fighting not to be happy because of the service. There was another story. This is the problem. Old age, short-term memory. So service, connected to enjoyment. So again, just to summarize, just to summarize again, we're talking about happiness and how it's affected by selfishness, and then going from selfishness to service, and then enjoyment also is in the mix. So there's enjoyment that's highly selfish. And one thing I wrote a big book on our Vaishnava culture and the environment. So I always have to mention the environment. This kind of American culture that we live in, it's just unconscious for us. We're not really conscious of it. We're really controlled by it. It's our culture. This is where we live. So practically everything we do as part of the culture is destroying nature. Now, Americans are not very much aware of that, but around the world there's destruction of nature. This is just because of how modern society has evolved in the last 150, 200 years. There's tremendous destruction of nature that, when I say destruction of nature, maybe I'm overstating it a little bit. There's a beautiful chart I really like that shows that, let me just talk briefly about the history of the last century, the 20th century. That when industrialization first started, then there was a lot of reaction against industrialization because capitalists were getting rich and then people were exploited, they were poor. So then, in a way, capitalism and socialism kind of joined up in the 20s, and everybody started getting their share. Of course, not as much as they want, but still, this capitalism and socialism kind of joined up to create a real consumer economy. So the consumer economy has always existed since who knows when, but this, in the 20s, it really became the basis of the modern economy. Before that, it was not. People were a lot poorer. It wasn't such a so well developed as we have now. So then, the 20s, then the 30s was depression. So there wasn't so much of an opportunity for high-level destruction of nature, exploitation, let's say, rather than destruction. Then the war in the 40s, and then in the 50s, there was a tremendous resurgence, bounding back from the big war, World War II. 50s and 60s it was a lot of development, a lot of exploitation of natural resources. So by the 1970s, something called overconsumption was happening. In other words, the world is able to produce so much. If we farm, or if we take minerals or oil or something like this from the earth, then the earth can replenish. And this is this term sustainability. So you hear the concept of sustainable. Well, something's sustainable, something's not sustainable. Well, up until the early 70s, things were pretty much sustainable. In the 50s and 60s, especially America and then other countries became very aggressive in their pursuit of resources, natural resources. But in the 70s, we became expert at exploiting the natural resources. So that expertise created, there's one example is water. When people move from rural areas to the cities require more water. Somehow rural areas, people scattered in the rural areas, they're less destructive to the groundwater. So there are many cities that take water from under the earth, the groundwater, in reservoirs under the earth, and that depletes the water. And that water is built up over hundreds of years. So that the rain cycle and the snow cycle, and it doesn't have a chance to replenish the water. So that's just one example where we ruin, because we use certain agricultural methods to expand production, we interrupt some ecosystems. So there's so many examples. So anyway, in the 70s, 80s, it began to get worse and worse and worse. Now there's this chart that says we currently need about 1.6 Earths to satisfy all of our uses, worldwide uses. But if everybody were to live like Americans, we would need 5 Earths. So we're kind of unconscious of the fact that when we take the subway, when we ride in a car, a taxi, when we turn on the water, we turn on the water because we no longer draw water from wells. So that running water, overuse of water, our electricity, the electricity comes from oil or coal, some fossil fuel. So right now this electricity is coming to us and we're getting the oil from somewhere. Let's say it comes from the Middle East, and we're burning the oil to produce electricity, and it got to us by shipping, and the shipping is costly to the environment. We produce other products besides electricity. We produce plastics. So it's all, we think, oh, we have to get rid of these plastic bags. We have to recycle. But there's been studies actually that these things are really inadequate. So the point I'm getting at, enjoyment. This is how modern culture enjoys. We find satisfaction in the external world because all of this exploitation of natural resources is to give us comfort, health, and longevity. Generally, comfort. But we also fancy that we can get health and longevity by living like this. But comfort, we're highly addicted to comfort. And one time, this is a favorite story that I have a very good friend. We've known each other for about 50 years. He likes to tell me stories of Prabhupada, the founder. And because we're both old, he's told me this story about 15, 20 times. Every time I think he thinks he's telling me for the first time. But anyway, hopefully I'm telling you for the first time. So this story goes that Prabhupada was standing on the second floor of this building, and they were overlooking these marble works, and they had these laborers working on the marble, and the laborers in India are not paid very much. So, but But Prabhupada was very appreciative of the village people, simple people of India. So, because they live simple lives, but they're satisfied, and they also are very devoted people. My point is going to be, I'll come to the end of the story first, I'll tell you the punchline, because they find satisfaction just in their local temples. We've seen those of us who've lived in India in this like holy place. Vrindavan is this holy place. So when the village people come, they ride their bullock carts or the ox carts, and for miles on the celebration times of the year. There are different times of the year where they have these celebrations. So they come for miles, and if you've ever seen, sometimes they just sleep on the cart, and then somehow the oxen, they know where to go, so they're going along. They go at this kind of a slow pace. But so it's beautiful to see these wonderful people who know how to live without wanting so much. They know how to tolerate nature. The problem with modern culture is that we do two things with nature. We exploit nature, or we fight with nature. Exploit and fight. Generally. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, that's a generalization, but whereas in Vaishnava culture, you from ancient times tolerate nature. It says, there's a book, I know I'm deviating from the story about Prabhupada, but tolerance. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that tolerance makes one eligible for liberation. If you tolerate Shita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukkha, Da, the happiness, distress, summer, winter, these things are coming and going, tolerate. And Yamhina Vyatyan Vyate, one who can tolerate becomes Amrita, gets the nectar or liberation. So, tolerance. But that's not the point of the story exactly. So Prabhupada was standing on this second floor looking down, and he had some of his leaders who were Americans at the time. Now, that was in the 70s that Prabhupada had. The movement was more American leaders and some Europeans and one or two Indians. Now it's sort of the other way around. So they were standing with him, and Prabhupada was admiring the sort of the satisfaction of these people working on marble cutting. They were doing it for the temple, for the new temple. So he was asking, how much did they get paid every day? And he was sort of commenting, kind of musing that, and they just have some rice and simple food to eat, and they're just satisfied like this. So then one of the American leaders said, so Prabhupada, we should become like that. And Prabhupada just turned and said, you will never. Because we're so conditioned. Maybe one of you can, I don't know, but in general, we are so conditioned by our culture. And unfortunately, the American culture is the worst culture in the world regarding our relationship with nature. It's our cultural attitude. Exploit or fight. So we don't live with nature very well. On the basis of enjoyment. Misplaced enjoyment. enjoyment is our nature as a soul. But we've misunderstood. It's not, we don't enjoy by this selfish attitude like a drug addict, like we're, but unfortunately, yes, we are addicted to our what is the word, comfort. We're addicted to our comforts. And as a society, we have our electricity, we have our running water. Just remember how long this electricity and running water has existed. Not for very long. Not in this wide scale it is. When about 150, 170 years, something like that. That's not very long, actually. That means you're somebody, great grandparent or somebody. They were going out and drawing water from the well, or they were living with candles or with oil lights or something like that. So those are just two things, the water and but it's a whole complex, so many things. So enjoyment. And the idea then is to move from selfishness to service, and along the way to experience a different kind of enjoyment. We can enjoy on this other level. It's not a selfish enjoyment. It's not that when I see you, I'm seeing a beautiful person that's pleasing to me. That's on some level, that's selfish. So I don't love you to make me feel good. I learn to serve. So when I serve Krishna, when I serve the Supreme, then that service connects me with the Supreme Enjoyer. So I enjoy through the Supreme Enjoyer. That connection with the Supreme Enjoyer. The example is given of the watering the root of a tree. So we water the root of the tree. All of the leaves and branches are nourished. So Krishna is the root. He's the root of enjoyment. So if I give Krishna enjoyment, then I feel enjoyment. But even if you don't want to serve Krishna, at least you can take from this presentation. It's from the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not saying these things just as some concoction, actually. I'm just presenting what I learned from my guru and what is there in the Bhagavad Gita. You can take that if you don't want to accept Krishna, service to Krishna, you can still take these two concepts. From selfishness to less selfish, mixed with a little service, to unselfish service, selfless service. So lower to higher. And enjoyment. Selfish, highly selfish enjoyment, like being drug addicted or like being culturally addicted to all of this exploitation of nature, overconsumption. To less selfish, trying to plant a few trees, maybe Exxon saying, oh, we give you oil, but we use 5% of our profits to plant trees, so we're good. No, that's still not good enough. To the highest level, enjoyment on this level of unselfish service. Maybe I've spoken too long, so we still have 3.5 minutes for questions and answers, right? Or insults. Anybody have an insult? No, I guess we better not do it.
Well,
I have a question about, say, unselfish, selfish, or selfish, unselfish, or selfless, on the matter of devotion. Because yes, that's true. We're always going to be devoted to something, but well, in like a lot of the times when I'm like chanting or I'm trying to really do service to Krishna or to anyone else, like I still feel selfish because I feel like I'm in my back of my head. I'm like, oh, this is for my enjoyment. So I just wanted to ask, like, how does one go with that thought of trying to serve, but being like sincere about it, and not having that thought that it's like at the end of the day it's still for yourself, that service.
That's a good attitude. I don't know. Everyone heard the question that he's saying while he's chanting, he still feels as though it's a little selfish, some self-interest. Well, the practices, and I don't care what spiritual practice, if it's their yoga practices, there are many, spiritual practices. These are, in general, if they're valid spiritual practices, they're disciplines. Disciplines to detach us from this world and attach us to the next. So attachment to Krishna, attachment to the higher realm, however you might perceive that higher realm. We perceive it as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, but it's a discipline to achieve that. That's what the Bhagavad Gita says, that this happiness requires difficulty in the beginning. In other words, it's not an immediate happiness. It's not this impulse that we get. It's not immediate satisfaction. That's the lower kind of happiness. The discipline leads to the goal. It's described also, there's three kinds of knowledge. There's theoretical knowledge, practical knowledge, and the goal of knowledge. So we learn something, we practice it, and then we achieve the goal of our practice. So that's Krishna consciousness or spiritual life. So selfishness. It's not possible to get rid of it immediately. Prabhupada sometimes uses the analogy of a fan. If you turn off a fan, in India they used to have a lot of these circulating fans. So if you turn off the electricity, it still rotates a little bit and then stops. So we're becoming detached from that, the Maya energy that's driving our desires. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I have a question about bhakti and love. What is how they are connected closely, or
It's
if you
interesting.
can
Yes,
just-
it's a nice question. Bhakti and love. It's an interesting question because Prabhupada doesn't translate bhakti as devotion.
Mhm.
He translates as devotional service. An interesting concept, that service is there because it's an active component.
Mhm.
If you just say devotion, that could be confused with this kind of love that's
Existence.
I'm connected with the divine in some abstract way,
Mhm.
but based on service. So there's a
Means physical servicing.
yes,
Physically, do something.
yeah, do something. Yeah, exactly.
Fine body words.
So, but there's
Don't just think about it, but do something. Right?
there's exception.
Okay.
There are exceptions that if somehow you physically cannot do anything,
Suppose you are just chanting. So, in which category it falls?
chanting is doing also.
No, what I'm telling is it bhakti or it leads to the law or
Is chanting leading to love? Which category?
Yes,
is it
of
just a
course.
bhakti?
Of course, that's bhakti.
But will it
Chant.
ultimately lead to the law, or
Yes,
it
of course.
stops there?
Of course, it leads to love.
Love.
Yes.
So
But
to
love
reach
is-
the stage of love, bhakti is a step. Can I call it like that way?
No,
Like chanting?
bhakti is love.
Bhakti itself is love.
Within bhakti
Mhm.
comes love. Prema.
Alright.
Prema is within bhakti.
Mhm.
But there's an interesting. Oh, we've gone a little over time. Okay, I'll just finish up. Quickly, he's saying quickly, finish. No. So I'll just say one thing that I have a very favorite chapter there's a book called Chaitanya Charitamrita about the life of Chaitanya. So we follow Chaitanya. He's given us 8 verses, and in that chapter he gives his commentary on the verses. So without going into the whole chapter, which I would love to do, he talks about love. His verses are to Krishna, and he's saying, "Oh, Krishna, please give me love to you." But this is the second to the last verse. In the last verse, he says, "Krishna, I don't care what you do. Just put me as a piece of dust on your feet. You can crush me if you like, I don't care. I just want to serve you."
It's surrender. Basically surrender.
Surrender. So love, we think of love as the highest thing, but
Surrender.
this selfless service is actually, he's saying that that's higher than love as a goal. Of course, then love will come along with it, but then, anyway, that's
Love is the
very...
fruit problem. Ultimate fruit, what you get. After your service, you get a fruit in terms of love. Can I put it that way? Can I put it this way? You know?
After the service, you get love.
Love.
Can it be put that way?
Service is love.
Fruit to your karmas. Your karma is devotion or service. Okay. And your fruit is love.
Your fruit is love. No.
Not that way.
The fruit is connection with Krishna and service to Krishna.
What is Krishna?
Krishna is the supreme. We explain Krishna as the supreme person. But to say what is Krishna is maybe a little more complex than just for me to answer the supreme. Krishna is different from the monotheistic understanding from the Middle Eastern religions, the Semitic religions, the Abrahamic religions, that we understand the supreme in one way. From that, it's our sort of dominant understanding of what the supreme might be. But we understand the supreme as a supreme person, but with his consort. So they're almost one. This supreme and his consort, Krishna and Radha. So in particular, we don't understand Krishna alone. Krishna is with Radha. So male, female aspects of the supreme. And Krishna is also not separate from, you could say, a pantheistic idea that Krishna is everything. So that's a kind of a pantheistic idea, but that's also an aspect of Krishna. But still, we say that Krishna is the supreme, as the highest. The highest understanding is to understand Krishna in a personal way, because personality indicates relationship and love. So as Krishna's parts, we can experience love with him in a personal, reciprocal relationship.
So could we say, like he said, at the end, love is the fruit?
Yes.
Because in my hand, service is in my hand. I can do karma by doing service. But phal will be, he has to grant me the phal, which if he gives me love or generates love in me, that's my fruit.
Fruit of love is love.
Yeah.
If you're doing service, that's already love. To some degree, it can just increase though.
So that's a
I don't wanna
action by me.
Carry it on too long.
Okay.
So maybe
We have to.
You can
I
discuss
sus-
during
yes, we have
We normally chant a little bit and
yes.
take.
We'll make
Sure.
maybe 10 minutes kirtan,
Yes.
and then we can continue the discussion
Yes. That's
Yeah.
a good idea.
Okay.
in the restaurant.
So